Darius Coleman had stopped believing in lucky nights ever since rent in Brooklyn kept climbing and his Uber earnings kept shrinking. At 32, he was driving 12 to 14 hours a day through the restless streets of New York City, watching other people live the lives he kept postponing for someday. His car wasn't new. His phone battery was always low, and every notification from his bank made his stomach tighten a little more. That night, the city felt colder than usual, not because of the weather, but because of the silence inside him as he waited for the next ride request. But before we go further, if you love real-life emotional stories like this, make sure to subscribe, because what happened to Darius is something no one could ever predict. Around 11:47 p.m., a ride popped up from a luxury hotel in Manhattan going deep into Queens. A trip he almost ignored because the payout looked too low for the distance, but something made him accept it anyway. Maybe habit, maybe desperation, maybe just the hope that tonight would be different, even if he didn't believe it anymore. When Darius arrived at the hotel, he noticed something unusual right away. The entrance was guarded, not by one, but two security personnel, both scanning the street like they were expecting trouble. A man in a perfectly tailored black suit stepped out slowly, not rushing, not speaking, just holding a small leather briefcase tightly against his chest like it contained something irreplaceable. He didn't look around, didn't check his phone, didn't acknowledge the luxury car that pulled up behind Darius's Uber. He simply opened the back door and sat down without a word. The silence inside the car became immediate and heavy, almost unnatural, like the air itself had changed. Darius greeted him politely through the rearview mirror, but the man didn't respond. Not even a nod, just a cold stare forward, as if the world outside the windshield no longer existed. As they drove through the glowing streets of Manhattan, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The passenger wasn't asleep, wasn't distracted, wasn't even moving much. He just sat perfectly still, gripping the briefcase tighter every time they passed a streetlight. Darius tried making small talk once or twice, asking if the traffic route was okay, but the man remained completely silent, as if silence was a rule he couldn't break. About halfway into the ride, Darius noticed three black SUVs appearing behind them, keeping distance but clearly following. His hands tightened on the wheel instinctively. He wasn't sure if it was paranoia or instinct, but he had driven enough nights in New York to know when a situation didn't feel normal. Still, he kept going, because canceling now didn't feel like an option anymore. By the time they crossed into Queens, the atmosphere inside the car felt almost suffocating. The passenger finally moved, just slightly, pulling out his phone with slow precision. Darius caught a glimpse in the mirror. There were multiple encrypted notifications lighting up the screen, all disappearing almost instantly, as if they were being erased in real time. The man typed something short, then paused, then looked directly at Darius in the mirror for the first time. That moment alone made Darius's chest tighten, because there was no emotion in that look. No fear, no anger, just certainty. And then, without saying a single word, the man's phone screen flashed one final time. A bank notification. A transfer confirmation. $1,500,000 deposited into Darius Coleman's account. No explanation. No warning. Just a silent passenger and a life that had suddenly changed forever. Darius didn't realize he had stopped breathing until the notification disappeared from his screen and the sound of the city outside rushed back into his ears like a wave. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned pale, and for a moment he thought it was a glitch, some fake alert, maybe even a scam overlay from a hacked phone. But then his banking app refreshed on its own, again and again, each time showing the same impossible number sitting in his account like it belonged there. The silent passenger in the back seat didn't react at all, still staring forward as if transferring $1.5 million to a stranger was just another normal step in his evening. Darius wanted to speak, to ask what kind of joke this was, but his voice wouldn't come out properly. Instead, he forced himself to focus on driving because the SUVs were still there, faint in the rearview mirror, maintaining distance like sharks circling something they weren't ready to attack yet. The streetlights of Queens flickered above them as the car moved deeper into quieter neighborhoods, and Darius's mind started racing faster than the wheels. Every logical explanation he tried to build collapsed immediately. There was no way a random passenger could legally send that kind of money instantly without paperwork, verification, or alarms from the bank, unless it wasn't random. Unless he was already part of something he didn't understand. The passenger shifted slightly in the back seat for the first time, placing the leather briefcase between his feet like it mattered more than anything else in the world. Still no words. Still no explanation. But now Darius noticed something else. The man's hands were shaking, barely visible, like he was holding in something far bigger than fear. It wasn't panic. It was pressure. The kind that comes when someone knows time is running out but refuses to show it. As they approached a long stretch of road with fewer cars, Darius's phone suddenly lit up again. This time, it wasn't a banking notification. It was an encrypted message request from an unknown number. Before he could even think about opening it, the passenger finally spoke for the first time, his voice low and controlled, almost rehearsed. "Do not open anything yet," he said, as if he had been waiting for that exact moment. Darius glanced into the mirror, startled, meeting eyes that were now sharper, more alert, like a mask had finally cracked. The SUVs behind them slowed slightly, repositioning. The passenger continued, "You are not involved in this. Not yet. But you will be if you react wrong." The words didn't sound like a threat, but they didn't sound like reassurance either. They sounded like instruction. Darius felt his throat go dry as the car entered a dimly lit stretch between warehouses. The kind of place where even GPS signals seemed weaker. The passenger finally leaned forward slightly, enough for Darius to see his reflection clearly in the mirror. Tired eyes, expensive suit, but something underneath it that didn't belong to wealth or comfort. It belonged to survival. "That money in your account," he said calmly, "is not a gift. It is a trigger." Darius's heart dropped. A trigger for what? Before he could ask, the passenger leaned back again and added one final line, quieter this time, almost like he was speaking to himself more than Darius. "And now they know exactly who has it." The SUVs behind them didn't speed up yet, but they also didn't slow down anymore either. Darius felt a cold pressure spread through his chest as those words settled in his mind. They know exactly who has it. He kept driving, but the road in front of him no longer felt familiar. Every intersection looked the same. Every shadow felt intentional, and every reflection in the rearview mirror seemed to hide something he couldn't fully see. The $1.5 million in his account wasn't just a number anymore. It felt like a mark painted directly on him. His fingers kept twitching between the steering wheel and his phone, fighting the urge to open the encrypted message notification that kept blinking like it was alive. The silent passenger had leaned back again, returning to his still, controlled posture. But the calm now felt different. It wasn't peaceful. It was calculated, like someone waiting for a system to finish loading. Darius finally broke the silence, his voice low and shaky, asking, "What did you mean by trigger?" But the man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched the road ahead as if the answer was already coming toward them faster than words could explain. The car passed under an overpass, and for a brief moment, all light disappeared except for the glow of dashboard screens. In that darkness, the passenger finally spoke again. "That money is tied to a transfer protocol," he said, each word measured, careful, almost rehearsed. "Once it lands in an account that hasn't been flagged, the tracking system activates." Darius's grip tightened instantly. "Tracking system?" he repeated, unable to hide the disbelief in his voice. The passenger nodded slightly, still not looking directly at him. "Not bank tracking. Private tracking. There are organizations that don't use normal financial systems. They use people like you. Temporary, disposable accounts to move assets until the signal confirms a location." Darius felt a wave of confusion crash into fear. He wasn't just a driver anymore in this explanation. He was suddenly a piece in something he never agreed to join. The SUVs behind them shifted again, closer now, their headlights briefly flashing into the mirror before falling back into darkness. As the road opened into a wider stretch, Darius noticed something that made his stomach drop even further. The cars behind them were no longer just following. One SUV had peeled off slightly to the left, cutting through a parallel street, while another moved closer behind, reducing the distance slowly and deliberately. It wasn't random anymore. It was coordination. The passenger noticed it too, but his expression didn't change. Instead, he reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a small black device, no bigger than a key fob. "You should not have accepted this ride," he said quietly, not blaming, just stating a fact. "But now that you did, you are part of the path." Darius shook his head, frustration breaking through fear. "I didn't accept anything. I just picked up a passenger," he snapped. But even as he said it, he realized how powerless that sounded. The passenger finally turned his head slightly toward him. "Exactly," he replied. "That's how it always starts." Darius tried to steady his breathing as the city lights ahead grew denser again, signaling they were approaching a more populated area. But instead of relief, it made everything worse. More people meant more unpredictability. More eyes meant more risk. The passenger's voice lowered further, almost blending into the hum of the car engine. "Listen carefully," he said. "The moment that transfer completed, your identity became linked to a rotating asset chain. They won't come for you directly at first. They will observe. They will wait for confirmation." Darius felt a sinking realization building in his chest. "Confirmation of what?" he asked, but he already feared the answer. The passenger paused for the first time, long enough that the silence itself felt like the answer forming. "Whether you are alone," he said finally, "or whether you are carrying something they need back." And in that moment, as the SUVs adjusted again behind them, Darius understood something terrifying. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about what they thought he had become. Darius's mind kept replaying those last words, "whether you are carrying something they need back," as if they had embedded themselves into every thought he had. The city outside looked normal to everyone else, but to him, it felt like a stage where something invisible was already in motion. He checked his mirrors again and again, noticing patterns he hadn't seen before. The SUVs weren't just following. They were pacing, adjusting, reacting to his speed like they were reading him in real time. His hands felt slightly numb now, like his body was starting to disconnect from logic just to cope. The passenger, still sitting calmly in the back, finally placed the black device on his lap and stared at it for a moment, as if waiting for it to decide something. Darius couldn't take it anymore and asked, "Who are you? What did you put in my account?" His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. But this time, the passenger didn't ignore him. He exhaled slowly, like he had been expecting that question since the beginning of the ride. The passenger leaned forward slightly, and for the first time, the tension in his voice softened. Not into comfort, but into something heavier, like truth that had been buried too long. "My name doesn't matter anymore," he said. "But what matters is what I was carrying when you picked me up." He tapped the briefcase at his feet. "Inside this is not money. It is access, codes, layers of financial routing that connect offshore systems across 3 continents. Darius frowned, struggling to process the words. "I'm just an Uber driver," he said, almost pleading for reality to return. The passenger nodded slowly. "That's exactly why you were chosen." The words hit harder than anything else so far. Darius shook his head, refusing to accept it. "Chosen for what?" he demanded. But the passenger didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced out the window at the SUVs again, now slightly closer, like the distance between them had become negotiable. The road narrowed as they entered a stretch of Queens where construction barriers created uneven lanes, forcing Darius to adjust speed constantly. Every movement felt like it was being measured from behind. The passenger finally spoke again, his tone lower. "The transfer you received wasn't random," he said. "It was a decoy release. A controlled leak designed to locate whoever is still connected to the system." Darius felt his stomach twist. "So I'm bait?" he asked, unable to keep the anger out of his voice. The passenger didn't deny it. That silence was worse than any confirmation. "If I had used my own account," he continued, "they would have tracked it instantly. So I needed an unregistered civilian path. A temporary host." Darius gripped the wheel tighter. "Temporary host?" he repeated bitterly. "You're talking about me like I'm a container." The passenger looked at him directly for the first time in a while. "That is how they will see you," he said simply. "Not me." The SUVs behind them suddenly adjusted again, one accelerating slightly before falling back, like a test. Darius noticed it immediately, his instincts sharpening despite the fear. "They're testing us," he said under his breath. The passenger nodded once. "They're narrowing possibilities." He picked up the black device again and pressed a single button. Nothing happened at first, but then Darius's phone buzzed violently on the dashboard. A new notification appeared, this time not a bank alert, but a system warning he had never seen before. "Unauthorized financial linkage detected." Darius's blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" he asked quickly. The The passenger didn't look at the phone. "It means your identity is now visible in their secondary system," he said. "And once that happens, you stop being invisible." The city lights ahead blurred slightly as Darius's focus tightened on one terrifying realization. Whatever was chasing them wasn't guessing anymore. It was confirming. Darius's throat felt dry as the warning on his phone stayed frozen on the dashboard, like it didn't belong in the normal world. "Unauthorized financial linkage detected." The words didn't feel like an alert anymore. They felt like a label, like someone had stamped his existence into a system he never agreed to enter. His eyes flicked between the road and the rearview mirror, but the reflection didn't give him comfort. The SUVs were still there, now perfectly aligned, no longer weaving or testing, just steady, certain. The passenger noticed Darius's breathing getting uneven, but he didn't rush to calm him. Instead, he spoke in a lower tone, almost like he was adjusting the truth to something Darius could survive hearing. "They're not guessing anymore," he said. "They've confirmed the transaction route is real. That means your account is now a node in their network map." Darius shook his head slightly, trying to reject the words. "I don't even know what that means," he said, voice tight. The passenger replied, "It means they can trace influence through you, not just money." And that made Darius go quiet in a way fear usually doesn't, because it wasn't just danger anymore. It was structure. The car passed through a brighter stretch of road where streetlights lined both sides evenly, and for a moment, it almost felt safe again. But safety was now just a visual illusion. The passenger leaned back and exhaled slowly, as if making a decision he had delayed for too long. "Carefully," he said. "There are two systems involved in this. The first is financial movement, what you saw with the transfer. The second is verification movement." Darius glanced at him briefly, still trying to keep the car steady. "Verification of what?" he asked. The passenger's answer came without hesitation. "Of who controls access to buried capital streams." The words sounded unreal, but the tone behind them wasn't. It was precise, like someone describing a machine that had been running long before Darius was ever born. "And right now," the passenger continued, "they believe you might be the missing link that confirms where the final layer is being held." Darius let out a short, disbelieving laugh, but it wasn't humor. It was pressure breaking through confusion. "I don't even have a bank account like that," he said. "I drive people from point A to point B. That's it." The passenger turned slightly toward him again. "That's why this works," he said. "Because people like you don't exist on their radar until something passes through you." He tapped the briefcase lightly again. "I was carrying access credentials for a dormant financial structure. Not illegal in the way people think, but extremely sensitive. When I entered your vehicle, your system profile became temporarily linked through proximity authentication protocols." Darius blinked. "Proximity what?" he repeated, overwhelmed. The passenger didn't simplify it further. Instead, he said, "Your phone, your GPS, your ride record, they all became part of the same chain when I entered your car." And suddenly, Darius understood something worse than fear. He wasn't chosen for action. He was chosen for exposure. Behind them, one SUV switched lanes abruptly, cutting closer than before, while another maintained distance but matched speed exactly. It wasn't chaotic anymore. It was controlled pressure. The passenger noticed it and finally activated the black device again, this time holding it for a few seconds. Darius's dashboard flickered briefly, and for half a second, his ride app glitched, showing an unfamiliar overlay of numbers and routing data before snapping back to normal. "They're scanning actively now," the passenger said. "That means we are inside their observation window." Darius's hands tightened on the wheel. "We? I didn't choose this," he said sharply. The passenger didn't argue. Instead, he said something quieter, more unsettling. "Choice ended the moment the transfer completed." The words hung in the car like weight. And as the city lights ahead began to thin into another darker stretch of road, Darius realized something terrifying. The further he drove, the less this felt like a ride, and the more it felt like a corridor he wasn't allowed to exit. Darius's chest tightened as the road ahead narrowed into a dim corridor of construction barriers and uneven lane markings. The city that once felt alive now looked segmented, like it had been divided into controlled zones he was unknowingly passing through. Every few seconds, his eyes darted to the dashboard, where the ride app still flickered with faint glitches. Nothing obvious enough for a normal user to notice, but enough to make him question whether his phone was still behaving normally or quietly syncing with something else. The passenger remained still, but his stillness no longer felt passive. It felt alert. like a system in standby mode waiting for activation. Darius finally spoke again, voice strained. "If I pull over right now, does this stop?" The question sounded simple, but it carried everything he was feeling: panic, confusion, and a desperate hope that this could still be undone. The passenger didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the road ahead and said, "Stopping won't disconnect you. It only freezes your position in the system." The SUVs behind them adjusted again, and this time, Darius noticed something new. One of them had its headlights briefly dim and then brighten again, like a signal rather than a mechanical change. The passenger saw it too. His jaw tightened slightly. "They're coordinating now," he said quietly. "That means the observation phase is ending." Darius felt a surge of fear rise in his throat. "Observation phase?" he repeated. The passenger nodded once. "At first, they track movement patterns. Then they confirm consistency. Now they're deciding whether to escalate." Darius's grip on the wheel became rigid. "Escalate into what?" he asked. But even as he said it, he didn't want the answer. The passenger finally turned slightly toward him. "Direct interception," he said simply. The words didn't feel dramatic. They felt clinical. And that made them worse. The road opened briefly into a wider intersection, and Darius instinctively slowed to check traffic signals. But something in the passenger's voice stopped him from relaxing even for a second. "Keep moving steadily," the man instructed. "Erratic speed triggers secondary response systems." Darius frowned. "Secondary response systems?" he repeated. The passenger didn't elaborate further, but instead placed the black device back into his pocket. "They are not just following you anymore," he said. "They are mapping your decision patterns in real time." Darius let out a short, frustrated breath. "I'm not making decisions. I'm just driving," he said. The passenger responded immediately. "That is still a decision in their model." That statement hit differently. It removed the idea that confusion was neutral. Even hesitation was data. As they entered a stretch of road bordered by older buildings and dim streetlights, the SUVs shifted again, this time splitting into positions that formed a loose triangle behind them. Darius noticed it instantly. "They're surrounding us," he said under his breath. The passenger didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "Not surrounding. Containing options." Darius's voice rose slightly. "That sounds the same," he snapped. But the passenger stayed calm. "It feels the same," he corrected. "But their intent is controlled extraction, not collision." That distinction didn't comfort Darius. If anything, it made everything more precise and more terrifying. The idea that everything happening behind him was being calculated instead of improvised made the situation feel less like chaos and more like a process already halfway completed. The phone on the dashboard suddenly vibrated again, harder this time, and a new message appeared. This one, not from a bank or system warning, but an unknown identifier labeled only as "Node Confirmation Request." Darius froze. "I didn't open anything," he said quickly, as if the phone had acted on its own. The passenger leaned slightly forward. "You don't need to open it," he said. "It's already reading your signal response." Darius stared at the screen. "What happens if I don't respond?" The passenger paused for a fraction longer than before. "Then they escalate certainty collection," he said. Darius turned his head slightly, panic rising again. "And if I do?" The passenger looked at him directly for the first time in a while and said, "Then you confirm you are part of the chain." The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It felt like a countdown that neither of them controlled. Darius felt his hands start to sweat against the steering wheel as the words, "Confirm you are part of the chain," echoed in his head like something he couldn't shut off. The road ahead was still moving, still real, but everything inside the car felt detached from normal life now. The dashboard lights, the faint vibration of the engine, even the passing streetlights. All of it felt like it belonged to a system he had accidentally logged into. The node confirmation request stayed frozen on his screen, pulsing faintly as if waiting for a decision that wasn't really his to make. Behind him, the SUVs maintained their triangular formation, steady and patient, like they had already decided the outcome and were simply waiting for Darius to catch up to it. The passenger finally leaned back again, but his posture had changed slightly. Less relaxed, more focused, like someone preparing for an unavoidable transition. Darius finally broke the silence. "I'm not part of anything," he said, almost pleading. The passenger didn't argue. Instead, he replied softly, "That is exactly what they are testing." The car moved through a darker stretch of road, where streetlights were spaced further apart, creating pockets of shadow that swallowed the vehicle every few seconds. In those brief moments of darkness, Darius felt like the world outside might disappear entirely if he stopped paying attention. The passenger reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out what looked like a thin metallic card, almost like a stripped-down security key. He held it between his fingers, studying it for a moment. "There are protocols built into financial systems that most people never see," he said. "Layers beneath banking, beneath verification, beneath identity." Darius frowned slightly. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. The passenger turned his head just enough to meet his reflection in the mirror. "Because you are now intersecting with one of them." The way he said it wasn't dramatic, it was factual. Like weather conditions being reported before a storm. Darius's phone suddenly flickered again, and the screen changed for a split second. Instead of the normal ride interface, he saw something unfamiliar. A map overlay with shifting nodes and lines connecting moving points across the city. His breath caught. "What is that?" he asked quickly, tapping the screen, but it immediately returned to normal as if it had never been there. The passenger noticed his reaction. "They are projecting system visibility through your device," he said calmly. "You are temporarily authorized as a passive relay point." Darius shook his head. "I never authorized anything," he said, voice rising. The passenger nodded. "And yet, here you are." That sentence hit harder than anything before it, because it removed the idea that consent mattered at all. Darius wasn't participating. He was being used as infrastructure. The SUVs behind them shifted again, and this time one moved slightly closer than before, closing the gap by a noticeable margin. Darius saw it immediately. "They're getting closer," he said, tension rising. The passenger didn't look back this time. "They are reducing uncertainty," he replied. "Distance is no longer necessary for observation." Darius's voice cracked slightly. "So what now? They just take me?" The passenger finally shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "They still don't know what role you actually play." Darius almost laughed again, but it came out broken. "I don't play any role," he said. The passenger responded immediately. "That is what makes you valuable in their system." The contradiction made Darius go silent, not because it made sense, but because it didn't need to. The road ahead began curving toward a more industrial area, where warehouses replaced homes and the glow of streetlights turned colder. The passenger adjusted slightly in his seat, then spoke with more urgency than before. "Listen carefully," he said. "There are 3 possible interpretations of your signal now: accidental carrier, active participant, or controlled intermediary." Darius glanced at him briefly. "I'm none of those," he said. The passenger ignored that. "If they classify you as accidental, they will release you. If they classify you as active, they will intercept you. But if they classify you as intermediary," he paused just long enough for Darius's stomach to tighten, "then they will follow you until you lead them to the origin point." Darius's grip tightened again. "And what happens then?" he asked. The passenger looked forward, watching the road as it narrowed further. "Then you stop being the driver," he said quietly, "and you become the route." Darius felt that last line land in his chest like a weight he couldn't shake off. "You become the route." It didn't sound like a threat anymore. It sounded like something already in motion, something that didn't wait for permission. The road ahead had fully shifted into an industrial corridor now, with long stretches of warehouses, loading docks, and flickering security lights that barely reached the asphalt. Every turn felt more intentional, like the city was slowly being replaced by something structured around containment rather than movement. The SUVs behind them were still there, perfectly synchronized, neither rushing nor falling back, just maintaining pressure at a distance that felt designed rather than accidental. Darius swallowed hard and finally asked, "If I pull into a police station, will this end?" His voice was quieter now, not hopeful, just exhausted. The passenger didn't respond immediately, and that silence told Darius more than words could. When the passenger finally spoke, his tone was measured again, almost regretful. "Authorities will only see the financial layer," he said. "They will not see the system beneath it. If you stop there, you expose yourself without resolution." Darius blinked. "So I can't go to the police?" he asked. The passenger didn't say no. He said, "Not safely." That distinction made everything worse, because it removed the comfort of obvious choices. Darius exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head. "So what? I just keep driving forever?" The passenger turned slightly toward him. "No," he said. "You drive until they stop seeing you as uncertain." Darius frowned. "And when does that happen?" The passenger paused again, then answered in a lower voice. "When your pattern matches something they already understand." That answer didn't help. It just added another layer of invisible logic he couldn't see. The dashboard flickered again, and this time the glitch lasted longer. The ride app briefly replaced itself with what looked like a live routing model. Lines stretching across the city, connecting moving dots labeled with abstract codes instead of names. Darius's heart started pounding faster. "It's doing it again," he said quickly. The passenger leaned forward slightly, observing the screen without surprise. "They are calibrating your device as a passive relay," he said. "That means your route is no longer just physical. It is informational." Darius turned slightly in his seat. "I don't understand any of this," he said. The passenger replied, "You are not supposed to. Understanding is not part of the requirement." That sentence made Darius go quiet again, because it confirmed something worse than confusion: irrelevance. He wasn't expected to know. He was expected to move. Behind them, one of the SUVs suddenly dropped back slightly, while another moved into a sharper angle, positioning itself closer to the driver's side mirror. Darius noticed immediately and tensed. "They're changing positions," he said. The passenger nodded once. "They are preparing for split decision response." Darius looked at him. "What does that mean?" The passenger answered. "It means they are about to test multiple outcomes at once." Darius felt a cold wave move through him. "Test outcomes on what?" he asked. The passenger didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "On your reaction." That made Darius grip the wheel tighter than before, because for the first time, he realized he wasn't just being followed. He was being studied like a system under stress. The road curved again, and the industrial zone opened slightly into a wider junction with multiple exit paths. Darius instinctively slowed, unsure which direction to take, but the passenger immediately spoke. "Maintain forward trajectory," he said firmly. Darius hesitated. "There are 3 exits," he said. "Which one are we supposed to take?" The passenger looked forward, not at the exits. "It doesn't matter which one you choose," he said. "What matters is whether your decision remains consistent under observation." Darius's voice rose slightly. "That makes no sense," he snapped. The passenger finally looked at him fully. "It makes perfect sense to them," he said, and as the SUVs behind them adjusted once more, tightening their formation at the junction, Darius realized the worst part wasn't being watched. It was knowing that every direction he could take had already been accounted for. Darius's breath felt shallow now, like his body was conserving energy without his permission. The junction ahead stretched out like a branching decision tree he didn't design and couldn't read. 3 exits, all leading into darker, quieter industrial roads, each one equally uncertain, but none of them feeling like escape. The SUVs behind them slowed slightly as they approached the split, spreading out in a controlled formation that made Darius's stomach tighten again. It wasn't a chase anymore, it was positioning. Like they were waiting to see which version of him would emerge from the decision. The passenger stayed still, watching forward, his calm now feeling less like confidence and more like someone who had already accepted the outcome of multiple scenarios. Darius finally broke again, his voice strained. "If I choose wrong, what happens?" he asked. The passenger didn't answer immediately, and that delay felt heavier than any explanation. When the passenger finally spoke, his tone was lower than before. "There is no wrong direction," he said. "Only recorded behavior." Darius frowned, frustrated and scared at the same time. "That doesn't help me," he said. The passenger nodded slightly. "It is not meant to help you. It is meant to help them classify you." Darius felt his grip tighten on the steering wheel again. "I'm not a classification," he said sharply. The passenger turned his head slightly. "Everything in their system is," he replied. The words landed in a way that made Darius realize he wasn't dealing with a normal threat anymore. There was no negotiation, no appeal, no misunderstanding to fix. There was only observation turning into interpretation, and interpretation turning into action. Darius looked at the junction again, then back at the passenger. "So I just drive and hope they get bored?" he asked bitterly. The passenger responded quietly. "They do not get bored. They conclude." As the car rolled closer to the split, the dashboard flickered again. But this time, the distortion didn't fully disappear. Darius could see fragments of the hidden system overlay bleeding through his ride app, lines connecting his vehicle to multiple moving points in real time. His name wasn't visible, but a code was attached to his car's signal. "I see it again," he said under his breath. The passenger leaned slightly forward, observing the same flicker. "They are finalizing classification thresholds," he said. Darius turned toward him. "Stop saying that like I understand it," he snapped. The passenger replied calmly, Understanding is not required for participation. That sentence made Darius go silent for a moment, because it confirmed something he didn't want to accept. He was already participating, whether he agreed or not. Behind them, one SUV drifted slightly to the left exit lane, while another positioned itself near the right. The center vehicle remained behind them, anchoring the formation. Darius noticed it immediately. "They're splitting too," he said, voice tightening. The passenger nodded once. "They are mirroring decision branches," he replied. Darius's eyes widened slightly. "So whatever I do, they already follow?" The passenger didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "They are not following your car. They are following your decision signature." Darius shook his head slightly. "That's not possible," he said. The passenger looked at him directly for a moment. "It is already happening," he said. And for the first time, Darius noticed something worse than the SUVs behind him. He noticed that no matter how fast or slow he had driven, they had never lost him, because they weren't trying to catch him. They were waiting for him to define himself. The car reached the exact point of the junction, and Darius's foot hovered over the pedal, unsure whether to accelerate or slow down. Every instinct screamed for control, but control no longer felt like something he owned. The passenger spoke one final time before the decision. "Choose," he said quietly. Not as command, not as pressure, but as observation. Darius looked at the three exits ahead, each one leading into the unknown. Behind him, the SUVs held steady, no longer adjusting, just waiting. And in that frozen moment between movement and meaning, Darius realized something terrifying. Whatever direction he picked wouldn't decide where the story went next. It would decide what they believed he was. Darius's foot finally pressed down, not sharply, not recklessly, but with a strange, forced calm that felt more like surrender than choice. The car moved forward through the junction, and for a brief moment, all three exits blurred together in his mind, like they were never truly separate paths to begin with. The SUVs behind him reacted instantly, not with chaos, but with precision, each one adjusting to match his trajectory without hesitation, as if they had already simulated every possible outcome of his decision long before he made it. The passenger didn't look surprised. Instead, he exhaled slowly, almost like a confirmation had just been received. Darius's hands were still locked on the wheel as he asked, "Where am I going now?" But his voice didn't sound like someone expecting a destination anymore. It sounded like someone realizing destinations might not matter. The passenger leaned back slightly, watching the road ahead with a steadiness that now felt final. "Now," he said quietly, "you are inside the confirmed path." Darius frowned, trying to process the words. "You keep saying system, path, chain. What is this really?" he asked, frustration and fear mixing together. The passenger paused for a long moment before answering. "It is not about money," he said. "It is about control verification through movement. You were never meant to receive the transfer. You were meant to register as the point where it stabilized." Darius shook his head slightly. "I didn't stabilize anything," he said. The passenger looked at him briefly. "You did," he replied, "by not rejecting it fast enough to break the sequence." That sentence made Darius go quiet, because it meant even hesitation had consequences he never understood. As they drove deeper into the industrial stretch, the environment around them grew quieter, almost emptied out, like the city had been slowly peeled away. The SUVs remained behind, but their presence now felt less like pursuit and more like containment. Measured, controlled, deliberate. Darius finally asked the question that had been building since the beginning. "Am I in danger?" The passenger didn't answer immediately, and when he did, his voice was steady but no longer clinical. "You were in danger the moment I entered your vehicle," he said. "But not in the way you think." Darius glanced at him sharply. "Then what way am I in danger?" The passenger looked forward again. "You are in danger of being interpreted incorrectly," he said. "Because once a system assigns meaning to you, it will act based on that meaning, not your intent." Darius's grip loosened slightly, not because he felt safe, but because the idea was too large to hold tightly. The road ahead opened into a long, straight industrial corridor with no visible turns, just distance fading into dim light. The SUVs stayed aligned behind him, no longer shifting positions, as if the decision phase had ended and observation had resumed at a higher level. Darius's phone finally stopped flickering. The hidden overlays disappeared completely, replaced by a normal, calm ride screen showing only distance and time. For the first time in what felt like hours, the system looked normal again. But that normality felt more suspicious than the chaos had. Darius whispered, "Is it over?" The passenger didn't look at him this time. "No," he said softly. "It is recorded," and that word, recorded, felt heavier than everything before it, because it meant nothing could be undone, only reviewed. As the car continued forward into the distance, the SUVs gradually reduced speed, maintaining presence but no longer closing in, not because the situation had ended, but because it had been classified. Darius stared ahead at the empty road, realizing something slowly settling in his mind. He was still driving, still moving, still alive, but nothing about him existed in isolation anymore. Somewhere, in systems he could not see, his path had become data, his hesitation had become analysis, and his survival had become confirmation of something larger than him. The passenger finally spoke one last time before the silence fully took over. "You can return to your life," he said, "but your movement will always exist in the background of theirs." Darius didn't respond, because for the first time that night, he understood the real ending wasn't escape or capture, it was being permanently noticed by something that never forgets.